Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Deep and Effective Big Book Study. I'm your host, a recovered alcoholic, and this is going to be episode 13, my friends. And in this episode, we're going to be starting chapter 4, We Agnostic, which is step 2, and we'll be breaking step 2 up into 2 videos as well, episode 13 and episode 14. So after this one, be sure and stick around for the next one. Let's take a quick moment of silence here, my friends, and invite God to this, and I'm going to read the set-aside prayer. If you care to join me, that's great. If not, I'll just go ahead and take the lead. So, here we go. God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, my disease, the 12 steps, and especially you, so I may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me to see the truth. Okay, right on. So we got God into this. So my friends, if you haven't had an opportunity already, so please like, subscribe, and share this channel with friends or anybody else that you know that could use some big book study in their life. Also, I'm going to drop in my email. It's recoveredalcoholic1939@gmail.com. I want to offer my hand in sponsorship to men and women. Guys, I can help you with the spiritual experience. Ladies, I can get you hooked up with some other women that are strong in the program. Also, I attend 2 meetings regularly a week. One is on Thursdays. It is a all men's big book study, step study, and we meet Thursdays at 6 p.m. Central. Here's a Zoom code and password. And then Sundays, men and women are welcome, 6 p.m. Central as well. And here's the Zoom code and password for that. And since this is the Deep and Effective Big Book Study, we're going to go to page 25. And in the middle of the page, we're going to read where this channel gets its name. So the great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. You know, and if you're new to the channel, the reason that I read this every episode, and the reason that I'm inspired to name the channel after this is because I want you to understand that in order for us to have a deep and effective spiritual experience, we need to have a deep and effective understanding of the problem, and we also need to have a deep and effective understanding of the very thing that's going to get us to the spiritual experience, right? So this is why I believe there's so much value in going into detail when studying the book, right? I don't believe in just throwing the book at a newcomer and go, hey, read blah, 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 and come back and see me when you're done and we'll talk about it. No. I need to be sitting down with the newcomer or whoever I'm taking through this work, and we're going to get deep and truly understand why we're here and what we're doing. I think it's important. And so did they. And I mean they, the authors of this book. Okay, my friends, we're going to be starting on page 44, which is chapter 4, We Agnostic. There's just so much information in this chapter. And as always, we're going to allow the book to be our voice. We're going to use our book and our experience. And in this chapter, again, just like we did in the first step, we're going to allow the book to perhaps smash some myths and misconceptions that we hear in the rooms of mainstream Alcoholics Anonymous. There's another one of the biggest myths and misconceptions is that most people think that step 2 ends on page 57 at the end of this chapter. And that's not true. Step 2 continues all the way to page 60 after the ABCs, and we're going to get into that. Don't worry, this is good stuff. But so step 2 goes from 44 all the way to 60. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, well, stick around because we're going to show you exactly what we're talking about. So let's recap for a sec here, guys, and see where we've come from. We just finished up step 1, right? We went into great detail, and I'm not going to beat that step up again in this episode, but we wanted to understand that we now know what the principle behind the first step is. It's honesty with humility, right? We learned that alcoholism is a hopeless condition, right? And we understand that the requirement I must meet in step 1 is what it talks about on page 30 when it talks about concede to my innermost self, is that I'm having that first step experience where I've surrendered, I've admitted complete powerlessness, right? And like I said, if alcoholism is hopeless, then what a crappy program would we have if all I could ever tell the newcomer is that you're always going to be sick, and you'll have to fight just not drinking one day at a time, and all these other gimmicks and slogans that we hear in the room. See, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous offers hope. That's the message. That is the message that we're supposed to be bringing to the newcomer. That's why we're supposed to be talking about how we're recovered alcoholics, because there's no hope in recovering, which means I'm always going to be sick, and we're not. But when I can say that I have recovered, right, I'm no longer sick. Well, there's hope in that. This is the message we need to be bringing. And again, not just because I say so, because that's what our program says. So, on page 44, does everybody know what agnostic means? You know, I came into the rooms and I kind of thought I did, but, you know. So let's let our handy-dandy little dictionary be our voice today. And I'm going to read what this says here for agnostic. And if you look in the dictionary, they have agnostic, agnostically, agnosticism, and a couple other versions. But let's just go straight to agnostic. One who believes the existence or non-existence of God cannot be proven or known. A person unsure that God or a God exists. Okay, my friends, let's go ahead and get started. You know, as I sit here in the moment, and I do a little prayer and meditation before I ever even turn the camera on, right, and start recording for you guys. And you know, I invite God into this in my own way, so I can ask Him for my words to be His words, right, and inspire me to speak eloquently and to speak something of some type of message that will reach some of you out there. That, you know, that's my goal. That's my whole purpose here. And I've gotten questions and comments about, you know, well, why didn't you talk about this or talk about that? And you know, in previous episodes. And here's the reality of it, right? I could sit here and nitpick this thing all day long, and sometimes I do. But I have to go with what I'm being inspired with in the moment. And that's what we're always going to do, right? I can always go back and go, yeah, you're right. I could have talked about this paragraph in a little more depth, or that paragraph, and so on and so on and so on. But I just have to go with what's within my heart and just let it flow. So if I don't touch on something that's valuable to you, don't think I'm doing it on purpose. It's just where I'm at in the moment. So I'm going to do some verbatim reading as always. So top of 44, we agnostic chapter 4. And remember, the principle behind the second step is hope. Hope with humility. And this is what we're going to learn about. In the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism, right? Remember, alcoholism, we so established this word and definition that it is a disease. It's not a habit. It's not an addiction. It's not a disorder. It's not a personality trait. It's a disease. Listen to this. We hope you make clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. So let's stop right there for a second, guys, and talk about that. Strip away all the belief system of what it means to be an alcoholic. Because this is the question that we're asking the newcomer. This is the question that I have to ask myself. This is what the first 51 pages of the book were about, to help qualify the new man, the new woman. Is this what your drinking looks like? It's yes or no question. Let's read on. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Only a spiritual experience will conquer. I'm going to keep reading. To one who feels he is atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. Oh, and it did to me. But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he's an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. Remember, alcoholism is hopeless. To be doomed, an alcoholic death, or to live on spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. Because that's what I got. To be doomed. They're talking about death. They're talking about my demise, right? I have two choices. I can either grab a hold of a spiritual solution, or I can continue on to the bitter end and be doomed. But it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope. We were not true alcoholics, not real alcoholics. But after a while, we had to face the fact. Listen to this. Face the fact that we must. There's one of those musts that aren't in the book that they want to tell you. Find a spiritual basis of life, or else, again, that's another threat to my life. It's either alcoholism, death, or spiritual solution. That is it. That is my two options, right? Because remember, we can't live in a world of drinking and we can't live in a world of not drinking. We need something completely different. And it's a spiritual basis of life. Perhaps it's going to be that way with you. But cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostic. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted, right? So it doesn't matter, right? And I'm here to tell you, my friends, I might have said this in previous episodes, I might not have. But I can promise you, if this program can work on a guy like me, it guarantee will work on you. Because I don't want to talk about God. I don't want to hear about God. The hell with you and the hell with God. And I meant it when I came into the rooms. But you can see today that I don't ever stop talking about God. So something must have happened, right? Well, the steps is what happened. I'm going to keep reading a little bit. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. Well, that's what the 3 stories that we just read about in chapter 3, more about alcoholism, right? Especially Fred. This man had all types of philosophies and codes that he could live up to, but that didn't have anything to do with treating alcoholism. Because that's what it says. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could wish these things with all our might. But the much needed power wasn't there. Right? My problem is not willpower. Right? Alcoholics in general are the most strong-willed people on the planet. So that's not my problem. Willpower is not the issue. I'm going to keep going. Our human resources as marshaled by the will were not sufficient. They failed utterly. So this is that first step experience, right? This is what I must understand about step 1. I'm powerless. Now, we're going to read this next paragraph on 45. If it's not highlighted in your book, it so needs to be. It's one of the most important paragraphs in the entire book. Listen to what they tell us. Lack of power. That was our dilemma. Listen to this. Not lack of money, not lack of faith, not lack of love, not lack of family, not lack of social standing, not lack of upbringing, not lack of codes or moral, right? My problem is lack of power. And this goes back to the very first tradition about unity, common problem, common solution, right? This is the one thing that all real alcoholics share, is this lack of power. We had to find a power by which we could live, and then that's a threat. That's a promise. If I don't get a hold of some type of power, alcoholism is going to kill me. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Right? And I'm going to stop right here, and I'm probably going to insult some people, but I just got to tell the truth. You know, it talks about a power greater than ourselves, right? And we're going to get into a lot of discussion about choosing our own conception, and I'm all for it. But let's make sure we understand something here. When they're talking about a power greater than myself, they're not talking about light bulbs and doorknobs and Coke cans and whatever else people have come up with. Because it has to be 2 parts. Right? It has to be a power greater than myself, and also has to be able to solve my problem. Right? Doorknobs and light bulbs don't solve my problem. Right? And so on and so on and so on. It's 2 parts. And if we go to page 93, I'm going to show you something real quick. I'm going to read starting right here. Stress the spiritual feature freely. Oh, we're supposed to be talking about God? Yeah, we are. If the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic that he does not have to agree with your conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. And this needs to be highlighted in your book right here. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself and live by spiritual principles. Well, that eliminates your Coke can and your light bulb and your doorknobs. So it needs to be a power greater than myself, and I need to be living by spiritual principles. Inanimate objects ain't going to do it. And then I finish the rest of that paragraph. Obviously, but where and how were we to find this power? There's a question mark right there, guys. And it asks us two questions. Can you answer those questions right now? Let's look a little closer, shall we? It says, obviously, but where and how were we to find this power? Well, we know what the how is, right? Honesty, open-minded, willingness, honesty, open-mindedness. We're establishing that. But what about the where? Anybody ever thought to stop and ask that to yourself? Well, that's what page 55 is all about, and we're going to get there in a minute. So we're establishing the how, and then we're going to learn exactly where this power is going to be found. Next paragraph. Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Remember, it has to be a power greater than myself, and it has to be able to solve my problem. Two parts, and doorknobs and light bulbs ain't gonna do it. A doorknob cannot fix alcoholism. This is ridiculous, isn't it, when you think about it? You know what, and let's go on a little side note. I'm feeling inspired right now. We go to page 59 in our book, where we have the steps, 59 to 60, right? Let's just do a little experiment here, my friends. And let's read these steps and change up the word power greater than ourselves or God with one of these light bulbs or doorknobs. So listen to this. Came to believe that a doorknob could restore us to sanity. Made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of a doorknob. 5, admitted to the doorknob, to ourselves and other human beings, the exact nature of our wrongs. I could go on and on through the steps, right? Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with the doorknob as we understood it. See, you see how ridiculous that sounds? Because it is. All right, back to 45, my friends. Let's pick back up. That means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, we're going to talk about God. Yes, we are. That's what we're supposed to be doing. So here's another little side note. In the first 164 pages, do you know how many references we have to God, whether it's He, His, Him, power greater than ourselves, Spirit of the universe, and all these other terms that they use for God? On 164 pages, we have around 266 examples. So think about this for a minute. There is more God than there is book. And for anyone to say that we're not supposed to be talking about the power of God in a meeting is completely delusional. Okay, I'm going to finish reading 45. I think it's valuable. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God, for we reopen a subject, neatly evaded or entirely ignored. We know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Yes, I have. Some of us have been so violently anti-religious, to others the word God brought up a particular idea of him, which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. Perhaps we rejected the particular conception because it seemed inadequate. And see, that's my story. See, I thought I didn't believe in God. But what I really found out I had was just a bunch of broken ideas, a bunch of value systems and beliefs that just didn't work for me. And that's what they were. They were inadequate. So that's one of the greatest gifts this program offers. We don't talk about it enough. Is the freedom, the permission we get to sit down and divorce ourselves from these broken belief systems and rebuild something that makes sense to us in its own unique way. So go over to page 46, guys. In the middle of the paragraph, middle of the page, it says, yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to assure you. Listen to this. This is important. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in the power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results. So, right, here's all I got to do is just show up with some willingness. And I'll start to get results. And again, that's been my experience as well. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and effect a contact with Him. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we begin to be possessed by a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. Remember, what's my lack of power? Well, they're going to tell me that when I get the steps in my life and the spiritual experience, that I'm going to get a new sense of power. I hear this all the time. We're powerless over people, places, and things. No, we're not. That's nonsense. I'm so not powerless over people's places and things. I am empowered today. I'm empowered to make healthy, informed decisions in my life. I am not at the mercy of the world. That's a victim mentality. It's a cop-out. And it completely contradicts the program. Because the book tells us over and over and over that we begin to have a new sense of power brought into us. Provided we took other simple steps. Well, how about some simple steps? We found that God does not make too hard terms for those who seek Him. To us, the realm of the Spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding. To those who earnestly seek, is open belief to all men. Yes, it is. You know, this I believe, you believe. That's the mentality. That's the philosophy that I take today, right? If you're doing, whatever you're doing is working for you, knock yourself out, brother, sister. All right, top of 47. When therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. This is a good sentence right here. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean. So that's one of the things I had to do. I sit down and honestly ask myself, what does all this stuff really mean to me? You know, this belief systems that I've carried with me, right? What did they? And the reality of it is they didn't mean anything. Again, a bunch of broken ideas and misconceptions. At the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to effect our first conscious relation with God as we understood Him. Afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth. Boy, that's my truth, man. That's my experience. I have come to accept so many things that I never thought would be part of my way of thinking. But if we wish to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we used our own conception, however limited it was. You know, and you go back to Bill's story, right? Bill Wilson was a confirmed agnostic, right? But when he talks about this conception that he had, right, the most bare minimum, right? He talked about God as his friend, right? And that's the way it should be. You know, if I'm going to enter into this relationship with this power that's going to be my caretaker and my director and my guide and my mentor, don't you think at the very least it should be my friend? Well, it is to me. Next paragraph, my friends, on page 47 is the instructions for step 2. If it's not highlighted in your book, it needs to be. Right? We talk about this all the time. There are clear-cut, precise, exact directions for each and every step. And here are the instructions for step 2. We need to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? Right, boom, right here. This is what I ask the newcomer when we're going to go through this work. Right here, right now, I'm going to ask you this one short question. Do you believe, or are you even willing to believe? Yes or no? Because if it's a no, we're done. Because I'm selling God, that's it. That's all AA is selling. Either you want it or you don't. As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. Wow, that's a great promise. All I got to do is just be believed to be willing, and I'm going to get results. Listen to this. It's been repeatedly proven among this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. And that's exactly what you guys are looking at right now. This picture, this diagram on the screen is what page 47 talks about, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure, right? And the cornerstone is the willingness, just like it just says. The foundation of willingness. That was great news for us, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith which seemed difficult to believe. When people presented us with the spiritual approaches, how frequently did we all say, I wish I had what that man has, or I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes. But I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. Again, there's that freedom, that permission that they're giving us, that was given to me. And I'm still here because of that freedom, because of that permission, as I got to design a relationship that makes sense to me. And right? And at the simplest level, God is my friend. My friend loves me. My friend cares for me. I can't make my friend not love me. He wants the best for me. Right? Sit down one day and write out the qualities of what a friend is to you. Right? What is a characteristic of a friend? Right? And that should be what your relationship with God looks like. It also should be the characteristic that I must have within myself. Right? Because if I'm going to expect somebody to have these qualities, then I need to be able to present them back to somebody else. All right, let's go to 48. And there are 3 little sentences within this chapter that give the essence of step 2. Right? They sum it all up in a nutshell. And we're going to read the first one. It's on 48. Right? I'm going to read it and then we're going to talk about it. So I'm going to start on the top of 48 where it says the sentence, many of us. So many of us have been so touchy that even casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. And here it is. Again, if this ain't highlighted in your book, it needs to be. Here's the essence of step 2. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we tried on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was the great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. And I want to talk about this for a minute. Right? Faced with alcoholic destruction, that's a yes or no question. Again, do I believe that I'm faced with alcoholic destruction? Because this goes back to step 1. And what makes me become open-minded to spiritual matters, right? I didn't show up with a belief in anything. But what made me come to believe? Well, the hopelessness of step 1, my pain of step 1. So he was talking about that alcohol is the great persuader. It beat me. That's what we need to be asking. That's the essence of step 2. So when you go to page 59 and you look at the wording of the first 2 steps, right? We talked about in step 1 how step 1 has 2 parts. About power and insanity, the unmanageability of the mind. Now, take those 2 things, move them down into step 2 and read the step. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. You see, step 2 is nothing more than do I believe I'm step 1. The same words are repeated. The same theme is repeated. Because if I believe I'm powerless, then I need to seek power. Right? I believe I'm insane in step 1. Well, then I need some sanity. This is what the first 2 steps are about. See, we're not here to debate God and talk about all the different denominations of whatever religions, and we want to go in all this stuff. You know, I used to think that my step 2 share in a meeting was, well, I went to church as a kid, or I was raised Catholic, I was raised Baptist, right? And we want to talk about, that has nothing to do with anything. Step 2 is, do I believe step 1? And there's 2 more examples of what I like to call the essence of step 2 in this chapter, and that's the first one. I'll finish that paragraph. Right? It said, finally it beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope, important word, no one will be prejudiced as long as some of us were. Right? And I'm here to tell you, the prejudices is what's going to kill us. Right? Because prejudices are about being closed-minded. Right? And if I'm not open to step 1, then I'll never get to step 2. And I might not ever get there. This disease is killing people every day. Just like it did in the 30s, it's doing the same thing now. Let's jump over to page 50, guys. And in the kind of the top of the page in the paragraph in our personal stories, I'm going to read this. In our personal stories, you'll find a wide variation in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. experience, not opinions, experience, has taught us that these matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. There are questions for each individual to settle for himself. Again, there's that freedom. There's that permission. And real quick, it talks about the stories are there because they're here to tell us about how the reader approaches and conceives the power great himself. Right? The stories aren't about sobriety. The stories aren't the instructions on how to recover. And you got to remember that when this book, this 1939 came out, that's all the stories had to do with. Today, they got most of the stories in the 4th edition are a bunch of crap. Right? They have nothing to do with the program or how the authors are approaching and conceiving of a power greater than themselves. Now, I've said this before in another episode. The stories today don't represent the program. They might represent the membership, the fellowship, but they don't represent the program, and those are two completely different things. On one proposition, however, these men and women strikingly agree. Every one of them has gained access to, believes in a power greater than himself. This power has, in each case, accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. So, who are these men and women? Well, these are recovered alcoholics. That's what a recovered alcoholic says. That's what this recovered alcoholic says. Because I've done exactly what this paragraph says, and I've gotten exactly what this paragraph says it'll promise. Let's keep going. It says, here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. Again, who are these thousands of men and women? These are recovered alcoholics. And they said, worldly indeed. Do we know what the definition of worldly is? I didn't. I thought I did. But I'm going to read it. It says, earthly, materialistic, hardened, non-religious, sophisticated, unprincipled, concerned mostly with affairs and pleasures of the world. Well, that sounds just like me. But yet, here I am today. Completely new set of conceptions and belief systems now dominate my life. Listen to what they say. They flatly declare, what's outside the scope of that? Nothing. That since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and that attitude is willingness, and do certain simple things. Remember that they use the word simple 18 times to describe the program, because that's what it is. We need to stop complicating it. There was a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. These are promises, my friends. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, that's step one again. They found a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Let's just talk here for a second. Listen to what they tell us, right? They go back and talk about step one again. Total failure of human resources. But listen to what we get. New power. Again, not powers over people, places, and things. That's treatment center crap. Power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction. Do you know what those 4 things replace, my friends? Go to page 151 in your book, and I'll show you. Because when I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, the hopeless alcoholic, and on the bottom of page 151 in chapter 11, A Vision for You, they talk about the hideous 4 horsemen. Terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. See, that's what I have when I get here. But today, I now have power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction. Right? Alcoholism will produce the hideous 4 horsemen in my life. Untreated alcoholism, let me say that. Spiritual experience will give me power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction. And again, I can't achieve those 4 things on my own. I must have God to do that. Listen to what else they say. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Wholeheartedly. Right? We can't half-ass this thing. We just can't take a stab at it. We have to go all in. Do you have the desperation of a drowning man or not? Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, right? Do you find yourself baffled and confused by your existence? I sure did. They show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory, right? So just not drinking is enough. Sobriety is not enough. I need something completely different. They show how the change came over them. Listen to this. When many hundreds of people, again, who are these people that we're talking about? Recovered alcoholics are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives. They present the powerful reason why one should have faith. So they don't say that the most important fact of their life today is that they're sober or they're not drinking. They talk about the most important fact of their life is their relationship with God. See, and I've said this before, is that, see, we're here for recovery, not sobriety. Right? My relationship with God equals recovery. Sobriety becomes the inevitable byproduct of that. Okay, guys, so we're going to wrap up this episode now, and we're going to pick back up in episode 14 and finish the rest of the step. Always, I want to drop in my email address, recoveredalcoholic1939@gmail.com. If you have questions, comments, concerns, by all means, feel free to holler at me. Anybody looking for spiritual experience, as that means sponsorship, men and women, reach out to me. I can get you taken care of. And from the bottom of page 164, may God bless you and keep you until then. So take care and much love.